Bien, je pense qu'on peut commencer. Je vais laisser Lise Moret, la présidente de notre commission recherche, faire l'introduction pour ce webinaire. Et on va switcher en anglais, du coup, pour nos présentateurs. Merci. Lise, je te laisse la parole.
Merci, Min, and thank you, everyone. Yes, indeed, I would like to make this introduction on behalf of the Research Commission from the French CIF. So through this commission, we try to, let's say, fill the gap between the investment community and the research community and especially the research on sustainable finance. So the current topic and the topic we will be discussing today with Urgewald is an important one. So you probably all know that Urgewald is a well-known NGO that contributed tremendously to the sort of needed frameworks regarding climate risks with well spread tools like the Global Coal Exit List, the Global Oil and Gas Exit List. So through the Research Commission, we are very happy to connect, as I was saying, the investors with sort of research and solution and open data sources like what Urgewald can offer today. So we'll speak about metallurgical coal. I also want to mention that the resource provided by Urgewald is something that will be very helpful for engagement purposes. The engagement platform that the French CIF is managing is, let's say, coordinating across the French market today, is very committed to climate change. And obviously, metallurgical coal will be an important engagement topic for some of you, and will be, let's say, used and discussed through this French CIF engagement platform. So I will leave the floor to Lia Wagner from Urgewald, and thank you, Lia, again for this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lise, for the introduction. I will directly share my screen. Okay, yeah, so my name is Lia Wagner. I work for the research team of Urgewald, doing research for the Global Coal Exit List and the Met Coal Exit List. And I'm here today to present our new tool, the Metallurgical Coal Exit List, also called the MCEL. So you probably all know about Urgewald. We are an environmental and human rights organization existing since 30 years, and we have a strong focus on data and research. And in 2017, we published our first database, which Lise mentioned already, the Global Coal Exit List, which has a bit of a misleading name, actually, because the Global Coal Exit List is only on thermal coal. We included met coal at the beginning, but lots of financial institutions gave us the feedback that they can't use our data if met coal is included. So time just wasn't right, but now green steel production has increased, or like it's possible to produce green steel in a much bigger scale now. So it's time to focus also on met coal. Despite the progress in green steel production, met coal is still seen as the good kind of coal. Here's a quote from the former CEO of Tech Resources saying that they are not doing the bad coal, but the good coal. But actually, this is how the good coal looks like. It's exactly as dirty as thermal coal. This is a mine from Glencore in Canada. And what Glencore is doing in Canada, they do mountaintop removal. So that means they're blasting away the whole mountaintop. And this is like a kind of mining which is especially harmful to the environment because it affects water quality a lot. So by polluting the rivers, it also affects communities living far away from the mine. Here's a quote from Heidi Gravel, belongs to the Kootenai First Nations. They're living close to the Egg River, which is affected by the Glencore mines. And she's saying, our livelihood is taken away, who we are is ripped from us because of the pollution of the river. And Glencore is still expanding. So they are planning to expand the lifetime of their Fording River mine. Doesn't sound that bad actually, but what it means, they are just building a new mine next to the old Fording River mine. So this extension is a greenfield expansion, which is actually a new mine. And there are 94 financial institutions which explicitly exclude thermal coal already for thermal coal developers. So companies which are still expanding. And now the time is right to also exclude met coal developers. So for this reason, we published the first met coal exit list in January this year. And this list is much smaller than the GCEL. We found 160 parent companies which are still expanding their met coal mining activities. So in contrast to the GCEL, we don't include the whole value chain and not the whole industry, but only those companies which expand their mining activities. And we found 250 expansion projects in 18 countries. And another reason why we wanted to include met coal is that we can't really distinguish met coal from thermal coal. There is no real distinction actually. There's a huge overlap. So thermal coal can be used in met coal if it's blended with other coal types, or met coal can use power plants. So actually the name met coal and thermal coal, this is like a demand side expression. So if it's met coal or thermal coal only depends on the use case. And for example, after the Russian invasion in the Ukraine, prices for thermal coal were that high that even met coal was used in power plants. And also both coal types come from the same mines. The only difference is that met coal often comes from deeper surface layers. That means that more methane is emitted when mining met coal. So met coal is up to 3 times as polluting as thermal coal, only the mining process. And why do we need to talk about met coal? Because it accounts for 14% of the total coal production. So met coal is used in the steel industry, and because the steel industry is so heavily reliant on met coal, it accounts for 11% of the global CO2 emissions. But actually not the steel industry is the problem, the coal in steel is the problem, because green steel production is possible and it's already globally technical feasible in the early 2040s, according to a grower industry. But how is this possible? So this is traditional steel production, where coking coal is used to produce coke and then is used in the blast furnace to reduce iron ore to iron. And this is the step where the major part of CO2 is emitted. There's also secondary steel production, where steel scrap is used as an input material in the electric arc furnace. So this is basically recycling of steel. This is happening already, but this has to be increased as well. But there's also another way of green steel production, which is using green hydrogen. This is not happening in the blast furnace, but in the DRI furnace. So another production site is needed, but it's the same process. Iron ore is reduced to iron by adding hydrogen. And this way, 90% of the emissions can be reduced. So of course, for this green steel production, we need a lot of renewable energy. So for the electric arc furnace, but also to produce green hydrogen. But this can be a win-win situation. So because steel producers are like a very big client then for renewable energies. So if they would have long-term power purchase agreement with renewable energy companies, this again would drive the development of renewable power capacities. So what does the IEA says? According to their net zero roadmap, they are saying that the existing sources of met coal production are already sufficient to cover the demand through to 2050. So that means we really need no more met coal mines, no more mine expansions, because after 2050, we really should not produce steel with coal anymore. And it's not only a problem for the environment, it's also a health problem. So not only the mines, but also the steel plants. So coke oven workers are exposed to increased risk of cancer, which is not surprising, actually, when I look at this picture. But also people living in the surrounding areas. So the Ternium Santa Cruz steel plant in Brazil caused more than 1,000 deaths in the last 15 years. And to change that, we have now this window of opportunity, because at least in Europe, most of the blast furnaces are very old. So the average age is 50, some of them even 70 years old. And so they will retire soon. So that means now is the moment we need to make sure that there will be no new blast furnaces, and especially no relinings of existing ones, but really switching to electric arc furnaces or DRI furnaces. And no false solutions like powering blast furnaces so with green hydrogen, because that means still using coal as the main fuel. And it's also, of course, a question of profitability. So it's right that for now there's a green premium. So that means green steel is more expensive than steel produced with coal. But this will change because the steel industry still gets free allowances, so free certificates for their emissions. So basically the steel industry gets subsidies. But these subsidies will be phased out when the carbon border adjustment mechanism, so the CBAM, will phase in. And that means that already in almost 10 years, like in the mid-30s, there will be a brown premium, and the brown premium will be even higher than the green premium. So for all those reasons, we created the first met coal exit list, and this is how it looks like, actually more or less like the GCEL. And again, this is only on companies which are expanding, so much smaller than the GCEL. And these are our results. So most met coal developers are headquartered in China, Russia, Australia, but also in the US, Canada, and also in Europe. And the biggest developers we found is a property. So in terms of the size of the expansion projects, is a property from Russia, Coal India, which is also quite big in thermal coal, so also the second biggest company on GCEL, and BM Alliance, which is a joint venture of BHP and Mitsubishi. And BM Alliance, actually, they even plan to extend the life of their Peak Downs mine in Australia by 93 years. And actually, Australia has committed to be carbon neutral in 2050. So that doesn't really work. And if all those projects which are currently in the pipeline, if they all will be realized, this would add 550 million tons to the current production, which would be an increase of 50%. So as I said, actually met coal and thermal coal, they're the same. So they look the same, they're both harmful to the environment. But what we see is that they are treated differently. So if we look at coal policies from financial institutions, we often see that they only refer on thermal coal and explicitly exclude met coal. And this is a loophole which we see a lot. Also realized in the coal policy tracker from Reclaim Finance. They included criteria for met coal last year. One for a project, also means excluding project financing, and one on company level, so no more financing of expansions on company level. But what they see is actually that there are hardly any met coal policies, only 16, and those are not really good ones. And for thermal coal, it looks much better. I mean, still there's, could be more, but at least there are some really good ones. But for met coal is still a loophole in coal policies. And if we see a met coal policy, it's often only excludes project financing. And we see here that this has not a big impact because most fossil fuel financing is happening on the corporate level. So only excluding project financing doesn't help much. And this loophole is, or the industry is taking advantage of this loophole. So this is Kevin Ball, the CFO of Whitehaven. And in 2020, he said that their banking relationships are strong, they are really well supported. So the coal business is no problem. But only 3 years later, the same man said that it's increasingly difficult being a coal producer to attract external funding, because Whitehaven mainly did thermal coal then, so only 5% met coal, 95% thermal. But what they did then, because they were really struggling to find insurance for their business, they just increased the share of met coal. So no more than half of their production is met coal. And suddenly they found insurance. And the reason for that, they said it was the diversification of their portfolio, but I wouldn't call it a diversification because it's all still coal. And this is what we see a lot. So companies try to move from thermal coal to met coal, or at least frame it like that. So when we do our research for the global coal exit list and also for the met coal exit list, we really have to look into the details, because in the headline it says Peabody is buying new met coal mines. But if we look at the details, we see that there's also thermal coal in there, but they don't like to mention it for obvious reasons. So, and this is a trend, not only we are observing that, but also financial analysts from Seeking Alpha is seeing capital flowing from thermal coal assets into metallurgical coal assets. And we created the met coal exit list to prevent that and to make sure that money is just not flowing from thermal to met coal, but to renewable energies, for example. So this is thermal coal financing since Paris Agreement in Europe. Decreased more than 50%, which is great. It's a big success and also shows that how much power the financial industry has. I mean, still there's a long way to go because there is still coal financing. And that's not only the case in Europe, that's also the case in Singapore, even better, minus 55%. And also Japan decreased massively coal financing. But again, this is only for thermal coal. And what needs to happen now is the same for met coal. So thanks for listening.